Hi there, let's deal with topic 6 in diversity, and that is comparing natural selection through Charles Darwin's evolution and survival of the fittest versus human-caused artificial selection. So Charles Darwin proposed the theory of evolution that survival of the fittest kind of rules nature and ecosystems, which means those who have the best adaptations, both structural and behavioral, will survive in the environment, pass on those traits to their offspring, and keep going. So, for example, here's what has happened over time to giraffes. Giraffes' necks used to be fairly short, but over time their necks have gotten longer due to the change in the height of the trees in the African Serengeti. So only those giraffes with longer necks were able to reach the food for the trees to eat it, and they kept on surviving because they had proper nutrition and energy. Whereas if you were a giraffe that didn't have a long enough neck to get the food, you ended up dying out. And so we call this evolutionary process natural selection, where nature determines what traits will be best suited for the environment. Horses over time have changed their height too. And so if you look, the ancestral horse was very short, but over time horses have changed. And these are wild horses. We're not talking about the domesticated horse. However, over time, humans started to realize that they could influence traits by selectively breeding or inbreeding to different organisms. Corn is a good example. Over time, corn has changed due to human influence. Humans have picked the best traits of corn crops and then reproduced only those corn cobs that had the right number of kernels on them. So, for example, seeds for the next generation are chosen from individuals with the desirable trait, which was nice long corn cobs with lots of kernels. And so then we would plant those seeds, and over time any corn cob that didn't have those types of traits would just not be planted and pollinated. And that's how we get the modern looking corn today. This is far-fetched, but humans can selectively breed hens, for example, to lay lots of eggs. So let's say a hen has a whole bunch of baby hens, chicks that grow up, and then this one only lays 100 eggs, this one lays 120, and the rest only lay about 50 eggs. Well, we would pick this chick to reproduce with a rooster because she's best at laying eggs. Same with cattle. We can pick the right color or coat of cattle and then call or kill these cattle, and we save these ones and we would breed these ones to produce desirable traits. So there are pros and cons to this technique called selective breeding. Of course, one pro is that economically we would get desirable traits that would allow us to have more milk if it's cows, or more corn, etc. A con, of course, is, again, we're propagating disease. A con to selective breeding is the fact that we are decreasing biodiversity. A technique related to this that I'd like to draw your attention to is something called in vitro fertilization, which means fertilization that happens outside the body, usually in a petri dish. So sperm is harvested from a male and an egg is taken out of a female, and in the lab the egg and sperm are placed in a dish, and that's how we fertilize the egg. Sometimes this procedure involves puncturing the egg like this to insert the sperm. This is how often selective breeding happens with racehorses. You take the fastest female and the fastest male, you harvest sperm and egg, and then because it's hard to convince animals to reproduce, you can just take out the egg and sperm and fertilize it in a petri dish and then insert it into a surrogate mother. Over history, we've seen attempts at selective breeding in humans, and that's called eugenics. And so, for example, Hitler tried to produce his own race of people during the war, where he basically tried to kill off Jewish people and was only looking for a certain kind of race of people. Let's look at the brain pop clip about selective breeding.
Dear Tim and Moby, how does natural selection work? From Fred D. Many species have come and gone during Earth's history. For instance, there are no more dinosaurs. By the same token, when dinosaurs walked the Earth, there were no people yet. Well, that's natural selection at work. Sure, but first, I gotta tell you a story. Back in the 1800s, a scientist named Charles Darwin went on an historic expedition to the Galapagos Islands and noticed something strange about the birds there. Each of the islands had its own unique species of finch. They were all very similar to one another, but their beaks were radically different sizes and shapes. On islands with lots of fruit trees, the finches had beaks that were useful for eating fruit. On islands with a lot of insects, the finches had thin beaks that could pick up a single bug. And so on. This got Darwin thinking. Eventually, he decided that all of the finches could have easily come from a common ancestor and become more specialized to suit their environments. The end. I'll explain. You just have to understand some stuff first. Life isn't always easy. Living things always have to compete for resources. Even in the nicest environment, there may be a shortage of food, or water, or even space. And a lot of plants and animals have to worry about being eaten. All these things are called environmental pressures. Got that? Now, in any given population of plants or animals, there are always variations. Look at a family of brothers and sisters. You'll see what I mean. Nobody's exactly the same. Right, except for maybe twins. Some variations, called mutations, can be passed on to your kids. These mutations can be caused by mistakes that happen when your DNA copies itself, or by outside influences like radiation or chemicals. So what do mutations have to do with environmental pressures? Well, imagine a coral reef with some little green fish living near it. There's a big fish that lives there too, and he likes to eat the little fish. As with any population of animals, the green fish have their share of mutations. Some mutations aren't so good. Other mutations, however, can be seen as favorable. A fish the same color as the reef is harder to spot, so it's less likely to get eaten. It has a better chance of living long enough to reproduce. And if it passes on its colors to its offspring, then over time the entire population may be the same color as the reef, as the brighter fish succumb to the environmental pressure of being eaten. This system of natural selection is sometimes called survival of the fittest, and it's the driving force behind the theory of evolution. These changes can take various amounts of time. Some are quick, and some take millions of years. Still, natural selection is pretty hard to miss. Just look at the variety of life on Earth caused by the different environmental pressures. One neat consequence of the theory of evolution is that all life on Earth is connected. Some scientists would even say that if you pick any two living things and go back far enough in time, you'll find that they have a common ancestor, just like